Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Keep the Line Moving podcast. I'm your host, Chris Gargano, the podcast designed to talk about leadership, life, and inspiration. Our guest this week is Josh Loeffler. He's the head men's basketball coach at Johns Hopkins University, and the Blue Jays are on the cusp of winning yet another conference championship. I was introduced to Josh because he was recommended as a great leader. As we got to know one another, I found out that that was the case. It's more than win totals for the Blue Jays and Josh. It's the connections he forms with his players and assistant coaches. You will hear his philosophy, how he runs practices, and how he makes those connections. You don't want to miss this one, and I'm so glad you're here. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest, Josh Loeffler. I'm going to read you some numbers if you could. Let's just start it off right here, all right? Are you ready for this? 24-5, 18-9, 24-4, 23-4. What are those numbers, Josh? They're kind of impressive. What are those numbers? Talk to us.
I think I played those for the Powerball a few weeks ago. Up to $1 billion.
You know what they are. What are they?
Those are our records over the 4 previous seasons. My 4 seasons as head coach at Johns Hopkins.
That's impressive. I want to know, deep down inside your leadership, how have you accomplished such success at this university for the Blue Jays?
Well, thank you. Number one. Number two, I've been really, really fortunate to be surrounded by great people in our program. You know, from our student athletes to our assistant coaches to our administrators to our support staff. I truly believe it all comes down to people. And then I think we're pretty. As a program, we try to be very selective and intentional about the people that we bring into our program. You know, I think we try to, in a really, really simple way, we try to fill the room with people that we enjoy being around. If you can surround yourself with really quality people who you enjoy being around, it's much easier to do your job, and it gives you energy every day.
So your philosophy with all those wins in the past few years since 2017, and then we'll get to your whole career, obviously, is being around people you like to be around. So there's that old adage, do you hire talent? In other words, for you, do you recruit talent? But is there something questionable about the individual? Tell me about that process to make sure you have players, like you said, are good to be around.
I think it's an ever-evolving process, right? A few years ago, I listened to a podcast about leadership with a guest who was very involved with like Canadian ice hockey. And his one biggest point was, you know, with the Canadian national team, with selection of teams, development of players, we're all bad at talent evaluation. Even those of us who would like to think of ourselves as being the best talent evaluators, even those of us who really, spend the majority of our time evaluating talent. And this is, he's done studies through the NFL, the NBA, men's national teams, women's national teams. We're bad talent evaluators. So I think understanding that as we go into the process is a good lens to look at things through, that we're probably giving ourselves too much credit when we say this kid can't miss. He's surefire. We don't know enough about people through the recruitment process, through the evaluation process to make clear-cut statements like that. So I think getting as much context as possible when you're recruiting someone, and I'm talking about recruiting an assistant coach, recruiting a player, whatever, getting as much context as possible. Really trying to figure out, you know, what's going on when you're talking to someone, what makes that person tick. I think those are really huge. And then I think for me, it's ever evolving because as a leader, as a person, I'm evolving, you know, I think understanding and being self-aware is really, really important. What are the traits of individuals who have worked with me best in the past What are those traits? What are the things that maybe stick out as traits that have prevented people from working well with me in the past? What do I need to change to work best with more people in the future? But I think just being self-aware and understanding like this person's really talented, but I don't know if I'm going to work well with them every day, and I don't know if they're going to enjoy working with me every day.
And I love that. So I love what you said. And, your evolution as a coach, a head coach, but in your evolution as a man, a father, a husband, a head coach, you're right. The expectations and your ability to be self-aware and understand what that athlete is saying to you, his parents or whomever was in the room when you were doing the recruiting process in given times, the high school coach, your requirements for somebody to be on your squad were probably different even as far or as soon as 2017 to where we are now. As you've evolved as a coach, how do you see yourself? I'm going to test your self-awareness right now and your evolution as a human being and coach. How do you see yourself? Like, what are those changes, those nuances that have evolved over the last few years?
It's funny. Someone in our department asked me yesterday, and this is like one of those, you're not sure if it's a compliment or a backhanded compliment, or you're like, okay, and it's one of my good friends in the department. So I took it positively. He said, Josh, let me ask your opinion on something. As a straight shooter, you're a straight shooter. And I looked at him, I was like, you're qualifying this. So like, I think I have to be aware of the fact that I'm a pretty direct person in many ways. Actually, my first 2 weeks on campus at Hopkins, my starting center told me that at a recruiting visit. We were about to go to lunch with a family, and he said, walking over to the cafeteria, he said, Coach, you're probably the most direct person I've ever talked to in my entire life. I think maybe I've grown out of that slightly, but I'm pretty direct. I grew up in, a small town about 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia, very much a product of the region, of, that tri-state area where, people are pretty blunt. I think my second language growing up was actually just sarcasm from my mother, so I have to understand that about myself. And I am a sarcastic person. I am direct. And that's a hard thing to predict when talking to people, how they're going to react to that. But those traits, I'm 41. I'm not going to change that much, but those are traits that are inherent to me. I think the biggest growth for me really has been probably in being a father. I have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old now. And I think it's just made me level off a little bit. I think it's probably good that I can't spend as much time thinking about basketball in the program. I have to think about raising 2 girls, and I think it's made me just have some maybe more balance in my life, and to be a little more patient. Patience is not a real strong suit of mine, but I do think that having 2 children has helped me to get a little levity.
And that's well put. And you say patience, and you say that, your coworker the other day said that you're a straight shooter. Okay. So you're at Johns Hopkins. You have a leadership journey that you reflect on. Can you do that for us as you got out of Swarthmore College in 2003? Take us to where you are. You don't have to give us every detail, but what are the highlights from 2003? You're looking at 20 years now, my friend. What are the highlights in that time frame?
I've had a lot of them. I've been really blessed. Just I've never had a real job. I get, one of the funniest things ever for me is just like thinking back on like, how did I end up there? And just all the pure coincidences that lead you to certain places, and that phrase of when a door gets closed, a window is opened. It's really been true in my career. When I was leaving Swarthmore in 2003, I guess throughout that senior year, I was surrounded by all these people who were much smarter than me. And in many ways, I felt like they were much more ambitious than me. And that was pressure filled in many ways. So I started interviewing for banking jobs, trading jobs. And the epiphany, if you will, was in an interview, a very, very preliminary interview with an investment bank in Philadelphia. And the only reason I got the interview was because the interviewer was the captain of our basketball team when I was a freshman. His name's Joe Cully. And we're sitting in this interview, and I have like this ill-fitting suit on. And he just looked at me and he spoke the truth. He said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I'm interviewing. I'd really like to talk to you about your." He was like, "You don't want this job." And I got my back up a little bit, like, who are you to tell me what I want? He said, "You've never called me about banking. We talk all the time. We hang out still. You've never had an internship. You've never done anything to prepare yourself really well for a job like this. This isn't what you want to do." And when I look back at it, like, I would go home in the summers and run camps, and I would, coach 7-on-7 football at my high school, and I would work youth camp throughout the day, and then I'd go lift and play ball and go try to help my high school coach with his summer league team. I hadn't done anything to prepare for these jobs that I felt like I should interview for other than go to class. And in a way, what Joe told me was freeing. It allowed me to go, you know what, I should try to coach. I should just start whatever I can do to try to coach. And that's what I did. And I went about it in the most, innocent, stupid, naive way possible. And somehow I landed a job that employed me as a 22-year-old assistant, and from there we moved on.
So let's go particular to what you just said. And I'll ask you the question directly. As a college graduate, you're playing hoops every day. You're working out. You're doing what you love. You just played college basketball at the college level, and now you're still doing it during the summer. Why did you interview at that bank?
Because money's real, and I was very much, money's real, and just peer pressure, even in ways that are very subconscious, are real. When you get to go and see what your friend is experiencing in life as a banker, you go, wow, this guy's got a great life. His apartment in Rittenhouse Square is sick. We're having fun. He's loving, hanging out on the weekends with his friends, and man, this would be cool. And then you start to think, like, and I see it with students at Hopkins, and you see it with students at NYU. There's a certain level of prestige at these schools, so that you at times think, all right, I got this degree. And Swarthmore was a highly regarded institution. I thought, I got this degree. What was it all worth if I don't go use it in a field that relates to the degree?
That's a great answer. Seriously, that's advancing the ball. I'm going to do a football metaphor. A lot of time in the NFL. We are moving the ball down the field today, my friend. And to you, we're on the fast break. So I really appreciate that's perfect. Josh, take us to a practice. What would we see watching a practice right now at Johns Hopkins University in the gym? Practice is starting. Whistle blows. Take us through it. What are we observing? What are we seeing?
It's pretty fast paced. Try to keep things in short segments. I've been fortunate to have some really good coaching mentors. And that's one of the things I've taken away from coaches that I really respect. Try to get from one thing to the next very quickly. Try to give feedback or coaching quickly. I try not to talk too much. Try to keep things moving. Transition is huge. Transition from drill to drill. Transition to the next concept. Transition from offense to defense. It's one of the defining characteristics of basketball is just how much transition there is. So I think we try to really move quickly, and we try to make it intense and competitive. Like, I don't know any other way, really. That's kind of my mentality as a coach. Just we really want to compete, and it's intense, and that doesn't mean we can't have fun, and that doesn't mean I scream the whole time. But the feedback is direct, but I think you grow into it, and I think you grow into the program, and the fast-paced nature of the way we try to do things becomes a part of who the student athletes are as well.
So do you set intention when they walk into the gym? So today we're going to work on X, Y, and Z. We're going to do it this way. We're going to have segments here, free throw line.
Yeah.
We're going to run, the baseline. How do you set the expectations?
So I text message our players the practice plan every day. So we'll have practice today at 4. I'll try to have a text message to them with the practice plan. I'll try to have it in their hands by 2. Sometimes it's 2:30. But I plan practice this morning at 9. I'll go back and rehash it, review, and edit it. It'll have every segment of practice. Then the guys, they know what things are called. They know what to expect. Or the older guys will tell the younger guys, hey, this drill's like this. We'll have our 2 offensive and defensive emphases of the day. We'll have a quote of the day, and we'll have the teams, who's in blue and who's in black. And that's every day. That's every day because, I don't know, as a player, I hated the unknown. I look back, and all I was trying to do for the first 5 minutes of practice was get a glimpse of the practice plan to see when we were running sprints, and I just think about that. I'm like, I probably would have just been a little more mental peace if I had known at the 30-minute mark, I got to, suck it up and run some 17s, so I think especially for our student athletes, they have a lot going on throughout the day, academically, socially. So being able to enter the practice facility with clarity of what we're going to do hopefully allows them to do it with a better mindset.
I don't think you're going to get this by me. Quote of the day. What does that mean? Is it a quote from a coach? Is it a leadership quote? Is it a motivational quote? All of the above? How do you select it?
It could be something from Angela Duckworth. It could be something from Bruce Springsteen. It could be something from, I don't know, Gandhi. It could be something from, John McEnroe. It just depends on, what the day looks like, and kind of, I guess, what I think might strike a chord to help with the purpose of our practice. It's not like I came up with the idea. Fran O'Hanlon is a big quote guy. And if we have some mutual friends who played for him. Don't get me wrong. I don't think the players love having a quote of the day every day. It's like anything. You do things enough, you start to feel like, quote of the day again. Here we go. Like, all right, great. But I think it helps with intent. I think it helps to have an intentional practice, and all of our studies and research show that practicing and training with intent is really huge in terms of progressing and improvement. So just trying to help in that regard one different way.
Hey, the players might not appreciate the quote now, Josh, but I'm telling you, in 10 years, 5 years, and that quote comes up again, they're going to have fond memories with you and the other folks that are part of the program.
Yeah, and you know how it is.
Yeah.
You'll make fun. I remember when Loeffler said that. That was, or like, just out of the blue, the not mockery, but mimicry or whatever. It's part of it, like every team, impersonates their coach and has fond memories of something that they found corny, but like maybe in 10 years, it still does stick with them. I think you're 100% right.
Let's talk about today's college athlete. And so you played collegiately, obviously, graduated in 2003. Okay, that's 20 years ago. So here we are. And you and I have talked about this, the evolution of the college athlete. They have a lot coming at them, more so than we did. I graduated in 1990. So my gosh, I don't even know what was invented back then. But you look at what they have, today's I have a 15-year-old son. There's so much coming at them, and overall, I think they do a wonderful job of processing it and paying attention to their studies and working hard on the court. But tell me your POV. You're way closer to it than I am. What is your point of view on that?
I mean, I think they have so much more information. I think that the world is so small now compared to 2003, 20 years ago. I didn't have a cell phone until my senior year of college. I can still remember having to print out MapQuest directions to go recruiting. Got a piece of paper and you're driving. And it's like this, that. We talk about phones and GPSs not being safe. Like trying to read a document on paper while it's just a different world. They, in terms of student athletes now, I think many times older people, for instance, coaches, whatever, we tend to decry the youth. It's like Chicken Little, right? The sky is falling. This generation will be the end of the world and civilization, and it's the worst. It's just never true. That's a tale as old as time, right? The youth of today will be the ruin of society has been the rallying cry of many an old man. I think it's lazy. Are there things that I think our student athletes can be better at? Yeah. And my job is not to tell them what they want to hear all the time. It's to tell them what I think can help them be better. But like I don't think we give enough credit for the improvements that student athletes have made and just young people have made in terms of the way they look at the world. In 2003, if you had told me about mental health and, emotions and feelings and the way they affect my ability as an athlete, I would have laughed at you and we wouldn't have talked about it as a team. And our student athletes now are able to delve much more deeply into the internal and the intrinsic and motivations that are very personal and feelings that are very sensitive, and they're able to use it to achieve great goals. They're able to have better empathy in many ways because they are more connected and they are taught at an earlier age what it means to be compassionate and a good friend and a good listener. Those weren't things we got taught in third grade. If you acted up in school, you got sent to the principal.
To that point, you spent many years as an assistant coach, and we all know the relationship between the player and the assistant coach is much different than the player and the head coach. So how was your evolution in your development going from assistant coach to head coach? But let's stay for a second on being an assistant coach. And what were those relationships like for those players that you were with during those years?
Well, I think my first 3 years as an assistant, I was probably closer with the players than my second stint as an assistant after I'd been a head coach for 2 years. I think both have great value. I think after I left Stevens and went to Lafayette, I was a better assistant coach because I understood in many ways the challenges of being a head coach. I think when I was a young assistant, the first 3 years of coaching, I didn't fully understand how lonely it can be to be a head coach after a loss, or how challenging it can be to make really tough decisions that affect the lives of players on your team because you're deciding playing time, which in many ways is deciding a player's happiness. So I think after I had been a head coach for 2 years, I had a better grasp on the task at hand for the head coach, which allowed me to be a better assistant to head coaches.
So what do you want your legacy to be? When you look back, however long you choose to do this, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want somebody in the coaching ranks or a former player saying about you?
Oh, that's insanely hard. Wow. Um, that I cared, um, that I worked really hard, that I always tried to do the best I could, you know. Um, I think caring is probably the biggest thing, caring about doing a good job with what I'm doing on the floor, caring about the players as people. That's hard. I mean, I think that part of it's really hard at times. There's some truths that you speak as a leader, and they're the thing that you think, and you put it out there, and it's uncomfortable and it's tense at times. So it's hard to, in those moments, always. I was this way as a player, as a student. I would just be mad at my coach sometimes, and at that point, you're not thinking like that guy really cares about me. You're just mad, like that's because they made you feel you know, embarrassed or upset with yourself. And that's a tough thing. So, I hope over the long haul that the players in our program and the people that I work with and the people that I'm around know that even when I was saying things that might have been uncomfortable truths, that I was doing it because I cared.
That's tremendous. I mean, listen, to your point, we cannot control the way our actions affect people, but the feeling associated with being cared for is powerful. And you're right. As leaders, people are mad at us all the time for different reasons, and that's not our intent. Our intent is to care for them and help them get better. And I listen, I don't know your players, but I'm getting to know you, and I'm pretty sure they probably walk away knowing you care. Listen, I can't follow up a question with that. The only thing I was going to ask you is you have no hobbies, right? I did some research on you. You don't golf, you don't do anything. You just love hoops. You're a gym rat.
I don't golf. Um, I think I kind of want to start playing tennis. It seems like a really good idea. I I intermittently work out well, but then I go on periods where I don't really get to the gym as much as I should. I enjoy mowing my lawn. That's fun.
That's
Uh,
good.
I think as I've gotten older, one of my hobbies has just been, and it's not really a hobby, it's a vocation. It's just being a dad. You know, I had the best parents ever. Like, and I know a lot of people think that about their parents, but they just always made time for me, and like it wasn't, listen, I didn't grow up in a household where I'm the oldest of 5 children. So there was a lot of expectations and it was a lot of chaos. My dad worked a lot of different jobs. My mom's raised us in the house for most of my life. But at the end of every day, even when they were telling me what I needed to do better, they were always there. And like my dad was always coaching my teams, and he was always taking me places. And I don't have a job that affords me to do that as much as he was able to do, or my mom was able to do. But I do think that time spent with my kids is huge. And like I said, I think just giving people your time is a huge deal. So I don't know, for me, like there's just some days where I think like, all right, I could go get a workout in real quick, or I could get home and be there for bedtime. And like that's not really hard math for me. I should, try to just get there for bedtime. And I think that's become, my second job, just being around to make sure they know I'm here.
That's awesome. How could we top that? I thought the legacy would top it, but you just topped it again with the parenting. What a pleasure. Thank you so much, Josh. Thank you so much. I hope we created even more Johns Hopkins fans in the hoops. I mean, I just really, really appreciate this.
Well, thank you for having me. This was really great. Made me think about some things I haven't thought about deeply, and it was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
And we thank Josh very much for being on the show. And my number one takeaway is this: expectations. When the Blue Jays walk into the gym every day, they know where the schedule of practice will be. They know that practice will start with a quote. They know that they will have an up-tempo practice. And those are the fundamentals of basketball. However, Josh spends the extra time to connect with his players and assistant coaches, and that begins all the way in the recruiting process. What a program the Blue Jays have, and I'm so glad that I met Coach Loeffler in this process. For our podcast producer, Paul Salazar, I am your host, Chris Gargano. We will have a great guest for you next week as well, everybody. Please give us a subscribe, like, comment, whatever you want. We appreciate it. Take care and have a great week.
We thank you for listening to Keep the Line Moving. We would love it if you subscribed or left a review. For more podcast episodes, check out our YouTube page. If you'd like to work with the Gargano Leadership Group, check out our website. This has been a GLG production, copyright 2023. For our podcast producer, Paul Salazar, and our marketing coordinator, Savin Narwal. Have a great week, everyone.